thank you very much, Leonardo.
Thank you, Pierrick. Thank you for the organizers for inviting me, and all of you for staying for the last day of the event and seeing our keynote. I know most of you are tired from walking yesterday, so it's good you will have time to rest now. I will not, the title of my talk will become more clearer as we move along, and then not so clear as we get further even up front. So I'll just start. Oh, this is not working. No.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So I just want to say that the work I'm going to be presented is being funded by this project by CONACYT, which is a Mexican Science Council, Automatic Data Set Transformation using Genetic Programming for Transfer Learning. I think this title will explain some of the topics that I'm going to cover. So to begin, I'll tell you where I'm coming from, which is Tijuana. I know most of you may have heard the name of this city, but not be aware where it is. So in fact, we say that it's the point where Mexico begins, because it's the westernmost and northernmost point of the country. So we are surrounded by water on one side and by deserts mostly on the other, and then by our friends in the United States at the top. And there's an aerial view of the city. That's Tijuana. That's actually close to my house. So it's a very dense city, over 2 million people, and it's growing constantly. I walk here in Bordeaux, and it's empty to me, no? I don't hear any dogs barking, any people talking when I go down the streets in the neighborhood, and it's not common for me, but it's very relaxing. Here, it's a very dense, very active city. Here is a nicer picture, no? My friends always say, oh, you show bad pictures, no? Of our city when you give presentations. So here's a nice one for those that want to do some tourist activities. But I prefer the other one because the tacos are in the other type of places. You know? That's my institution. We are the Galgos. The Thoroughbreds is the name of the mascot of our Tecnológico. I am part of a national system of technical institutes, the Tecnológico Nacional de Mexico. There are actually around 200 campuses, and the one in Tijuana is the largest one. And so we are the thoroughbreds. If you see me running around fast, it's because it's in my nature, of course. One important aspect of our city is what I mentioned before, the border. We are, I think, the quintessential border town in the world. Very unique border experience and interchange of culture there. If you have not been, I would invite you to come, of course. And this border that we have. So this picture that you see is taken close to Tijuana in a town called Tecate, which is close to the east, just next door. And this was actually made by a French artist, JR is his name, in 2017. He makes these nice, interesting social commentary pictures, and this was a nice one he made in 2017 there in Tecate, no? And if you come, you will try the best tacos in the world for sure. Okay, so you are all invited. So now to the talk. I got very excited when Pierrick invited me to this event, and so I say, oh, I want to talk a lot of things. So if it's a little bit disjointed, it's my excitement of being here. And so I will just begin. First, I will try to define what is artificial intelligence, because I'm going to try and talk about genetic programming and evolutionary computation within the field of artificial intelligence. I'm sure all of you have taken some or taken courses on artificial intelligence and always reach this difficult moment when somebody asks you to define it, no? And of course, I think it's very difficult, in fact, to do so. For example, if you would have asked Alan Turing if machine intelligence was possible, he would have said that thinking whether machines can think is too meaningless to merit discussion. No? If you would have asked the late Marvin Minsky, he would have described artificial intelligence as concerned with the development of man-made systems that have the ability to solve hard problems. In fact, this view, I think, is the standard view in machine learning currently. When you see any benchmark, you see a difficult benchmark problem, and you will see all the rankings of the different algorithms, and always trying to get the better and best solution for these difficult and hard problems. A more recent definition of artificial intelligence was given by the Spanish researcher in Valencia, Hernandez Orayo, who describes artificial intelligence as the science and engineering of making machines do tasks they have never seen and have not been prepared for beforehand. I like this definition, interesting one. Maybe you agree with this one, surely you do not, and that is okay. But taking this definition as like a good approximation of the current state of artificial intelligence, we could maybe ask current AI systems are, and anybody, what would be an adjective you would put in this case? Anybody want to give it a try? So I would start with inspiration, at least for me, no? I mean, oh, come on. I think all of us at this moment when we first use large language models, ChatGPT in particular, where we ask this machine to tell us something in our own native language, and it speaks to us better than some of our friends, no? And I mean, this is amazing, no? I grew up in a time in this field where the Turing test was like this holy grail of artificial intelligence, and now everyone can have this Turing test experience and in their smartphone, no? For me, this is a very inspirational tool, something that really motivates me, and I see my students being motivated by these type of results. Not inspired enough? Okay, come on. 2 Nobel Prizes in the same year for the field of artificial intelligence. This has to be something that inspires us, that motivates us to work in this field. Tell me 20 years ago that an AI systems or AI development will be winning the Nobel Prize in chemistry and physics, I would not have believed it. And of course, this year, such things came true. For our field, evolutionary algorithms, the same. No, just to take one example, I don't know if you're familiar with the Humming Awards that we have at Gecko each year, and the 2 gold and silver medalists this year. One was from the team of a colleague of one of the people here at the event, by Kevin Cortacero and colleagues, that they do interpretable image analysis of biomedical data. And they did this amazing work where you can have very interpretable results of this type of images. Another very inspiring result was the work of Penosal Machado in Portugal, where he used evolutionary algorithms to design a coin, that is a coin right there, to celebrate the digital age in Portugal. They asked Penosal, how can you design one with artificial intelligence? He used genetic programming, and that coin is minted and now produced in Portugal to celebrate this new era of the digital age. So for me, AI is inspirational. But this is not the only adjective I would use to describe AI systems. For me, AI systems are also disappointing, okay, in fact. For many reasons, and maybe you have your own personal reasons for them. Some of them I would mention is, for example, the terrible implications that they have been having, for example, in governance issues, and particularly in military use and this type of applications. That is Professor Marwala. He's the Undersecretary General of the UN, also rector of UN University, and he has written extensively of the use of AI in military and warfare situations. This, I think, should be problematic to all of us working in our field. Other issues, for example, the International Energy Agency, which is based in Paris, released a report this year and states, among other things that we should all be worried about, that in 2026, the energy consumption of AI systems, data centers, and cryptocurrency systems will equivalent the electrical consumption of the country of Japan. Okay, will be the same level as the country of Japan. And of course, just yesterday there were, I think, 63 people who died in Valencia due to a terrible storm that hit them unexpectedly. In Mexico, we are getting stronger hurricane events, which are, of course, very problematic. So the impact in our climate due to the consumption and energy intensiveness of AI systems should be a concern to us. Also, a report by the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace, this was a few years ago, found that 51% of democracies in the world are using AI systems to surveil their own people, okay? And this, of course, should be troubling to all of us. In fact, the US-Mexico border, the one I showed you before, for example, the Nation publication described this border as a techno-dystopia with robot dogs, with IoT systems protecting the border, using AI systems to, of course, control the border crossing with serious effects to the people that have to cross. Okay, so that's something disappointing. Now, last one I would like to highlight. For me, AI systems are very confusing, very perplexing. No? This is an interesting position article I would suggest all of you should read by Noam Chomsky, the father of modern linguistics, where he criticizes large language models. Not the engineering aspect of these models, of course, he praises them, as many do, but the scientific aspects of the model. Basically what he states is that while these models can produce text that is human readable, you see it as produced by a human, we are no closer to understanding human thought, which was kind of perplexing, If I have this system that can talk like a person, I would assume I know something of how people speak or produce language in their mind. And he states that we are no closer thanks to these systems. In fact, he cites a famous experiment by Marvin Minsky in many interviews, where Marvin Minsky and a PhD student of him ran random Turing machines, okay? Small ones, the type of Turing machines proposed by Minsky. And he found that, of course, most of them crashed. The ones that did not crash converged to the successor function. So basically, Chomsky concludes, and Minsky, I think, agreed at the time, that a core element of intelligence would be the ability to do simple arithmetic. No? Seems reasonable. But of course, as Toby Walsh talked at Gecko this year in his keynote, large language models and deep learning models cannot count. No? So in one sense, they solve very complex problems, and in the other sense, they don't seem to possess some of the core minimal elements we would expect in an intelligent system. Does anybody know what this is on top?
IQ test.
Yes, similar. In fact, these are known as the Bongard problems, proposed by a Russian mathematician in the 60s. These are pattern recognition problems. The pattern here is a logical one. So in the right, you have 6 images that have a similar pattern, and in the left, you see 6 other images that have the opposite pattern or are just different in some sense. Some of you may have already solved this problem, maybe others have not. If you have not, maybe you will feel bad because I asked my 7-year-old boy to solve this type of things. Doesn't take too much of prompting, he solves them quite easily, so he can detect the difference between the two sets. Originally, there were 100 of these type of problems proposed. To give you an example, a state-of-the-art paper published this year in 2024, out of 100 problems can solve 35 of them, okay? So we are far away from doing what a normal human child can do without any prompting. Similarly, I don't know how much of you are familiar with this competition, the Art Prize, Abstract Reasoning Corpus. In fact, Alberto Tonda is the one who showed me about this and is talking to our community about the importance of this problem. So these are similar problems, psychometric type of tests, where current state-of-the-art methods, ChatGPT in 4 and all of its variants, cannot solve. These are very simple problems where what you have is basically few examples for training and 2 or 3 examples for testing. State-of-the-art. So the prize was developed by Francois Cholet, who developed Keras. He's at Google, and they had a prize of $1 million for anybody who could solve 85% of those problems automatically. State-of-the-art is around 40%, a little bit above that. So far away from winning $1 million. Anybody wants to win $1 million, you can go and check out. I think they put it down the price now, but still interesting. So where do we go from here? In this era, I must admit, I feel very optimistic and inspired. I'm also sad and disappointed of the types of implications that the AI technologies can and are having, and also confused. No? Are we closer to artificial intelligence or not? No? So sometimes I don't understand. So one might say that I am anxious and depressed. You might not see it in my face, a happy Mexican face, but I am. So what should an anxious and depressed Mexican do? So I asked Meta AI to give me an advice, and he says, oh, Mexican scientists, you can get happy very quickly. So this is one strategy to get quick. I may take the advice of Meta AI, but I think there's a better advice. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this paper by Julian Togelius and Yannakakis. They wrote this position paper a couple of years ago, and they have advice for me, and maybe useful advice for you as well. So they say, choose your weapon, survival strategies for depressed AI academics. So I see this paper and I say, hey, he's talking to me. No? And side note, first, is GP genetic programming, which is the type of evolutionary algorithm I am most interested in, but of course I'm interested in all other types, is it relevant to artificial intelligence? I think this is the first question, because this is the weapon I am choosing, of course. So the short answer is yes, of course it is, so no need to ask anymore. Some historical context for this response. Since the beginning of the era of computation, both Turing and von Neumann identified reproduction and evolution as possible paths to development of artificial intelligence systems. So it has a long history, you know? And in fact, I like this quotation. It's from the book of Douglas Hofstadter in his book, The Eternal Golden Braid. He writes, intelligence requires breaking out of predetermined patterns. It requires programs which can modify themselves, programs which can act on programs, extending them, improving them, generalizing them, and fixing them. And I highlight those tasks in bold, which are the types of topics that the community of evolutionary computation, and particularly genetic programming, have been working on for many years. So if in fact Douglas Hofstadter is correct, and these are core elements of any intelligent system, then yes, genetic programming should be relevant, no? Of course, he may be wrong, and in that case, we might find a different inspiration for continuing down this path. So what is a depressed GP here to do? So Togelius and Yannakakis have several suggestions. I will only focus on some of them. And his first one, okay. The second one is increase the scale. The third one is decrease the scale. Focus on specialized domains, reuse, and remaster. Okay, and finally, collaborate, and collaborate. This is why we're here, no? So the last one is a given. If not, we will not be here. I think the first one is also out of the question. Okay, maybe after the conference you decide to give up, but at least for now, I'm sure you have not given up. What about increasing the scale? Well, of course this is possible, and of course I'm interested in such topics, but speaking for the planet, per se, I would say please don't. So I gave you the data point of Japan. I would also add that Japan is the 5th largest emitter of CO2 into the atmosphere. So in 2026, we'll have a second Japan. So Japan may go down to 6th place. And in 5th place, we will have AI data centers and cryptocurrency. So there's going to be a limit of how much more we can scale up in artificial intelligence and still continue to have a viable climate. There's also the cost issue. So Gemini Ultra, this is taken from the AI Index report published by Stanford this year, cost $191 million of compute time just for the training. Not the data, not the equipment, not the people working on the project, just the training. To give you some perspective, this is 10% of the total budget for science by public funding in Mexico for the year 2023. That means that as a country, we could only do 10 runs. Not even enough to satisfy a reviewer too, no? So, yeah, we cannot, of course, think of scaling up as a good strategy to follow. Finally, Francois Cholet has this to say, again, the developer of the ARC benchmark. He says, adding ever more data is certainly a fair strategy if one's end goal is skill and the task considered. But it will not lead to generalization beyond the data the system has seen. This is the conclusion he reaches after the type of results that the current state of the art has, for example, on problems such as the ARC prize problems. And again, citing Chomsky, he would say that AI systems, as they get better with more data, are less they can tell us of how human intelligence works. Because of course, we are not data guzzlers, no, like large language models. So you can continue to improve them, but we will not be learning anything of the way the human mind produces language, in fact. So, I will cross that off for now. And I will focus on the other points, no? So, again, I'm working in genetic programming, and I will tell you a little bit of the history and the current state of this field. So, in 2022, and so many of you know Leonardo Vanesci, he invited me to organize a special issue for the Journal of Genetic Programming and Evolvable Machines. And what we came up with was a peer commentary. The journal publishes a peer commentary where one invited scientist, in this case Bill Langdon, whom maybe some of you also know, wrote a position paper on the anniversary of the 30th anniversary of the publishing of the book by John Koza, Genetic Programming. And then members of the editorial board have a chance to comment on this manuscript, and at the end, Bill responds. So the conversation is an interesting one. The manuscripts are freely downloadable, so you can read the discussion that was produced. And I'll try to give you a brief summary, which of course will not do justice to what Bill and the editorial board members wrote. But anyway, I will do my best. So Just at 30 by Bill Langdon basically goes through the history of genetic programming, of course, starting with the work of John Holland, which was the advisor of John Koza, no, who published his book in 1992. And in fact, in 2022 at Gecko, there was a celebration of this, an event where Koza was there. He responded to some questions. And Bill Langdon goes through what was taught at this event, and also the history and some other topics. The first thing you may have noticed is the title of the manuscript by Bill Langdon. Maybe it seems a little bit strange, but yes, in fact, it is referring to this Jaws right here. He tells that John Koza had a joke that his book continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as he did more experiments. Kind of like the shark in the movie that starts out slow and then at the end it's like this huge monster, no? So this is why the funny name of the target article by Bill Langdon. No? So back to Bill Langdon's points, and he echoes some of the things I have mentioned so far regarding the importance, for example, of multidisciplinary collaboration in our field, and also the importance of tackling new and hard problems. He also, by the comments of, first by John Koza and then Bill Langdon describes, identifies some missing gaps in our field. So for example, in evolutionary algorithms and genetic programming in particular, the use of GPUs and FPGAs have not been so much exploited. No? So they identify this as an important missing gap in our community. Also, the importance of theory. No? Alberto Moraglio was telling me, that he worked on theory for genetic programming for a few years, but kind of got not so motivated because the field is just not doing sufficient and useful theory for the practitioners. In fact, this is a main topic of discussion at the Genetic Programming Theory and Practice workshop, which is celebrated in Michigan each year. And yes, our field, especially genetic programming, is missing theory. Also, the importance of memory use, assembly code, and bytecode in the evolutionary systems is something that's been omitted. Modularity, recursion, and loops, as the ones described by Hofstadter, and coevolution. And evolutionary computation, in general, coevolution has been studied, but genetic programming has not exploited these type of techniques. Okay, now some of the comments by the excellent peer commentary by the editorial board. Here were the participants: Squilero, Tonda, Bartoli, Manzoni, Medved, Johnson, Haywood, Moore, and Castelli. Each wrote a response to Bill Langdon's paper. And they identified three main groups. I mean, this is a summary that I make. You may read it and find a different way to organize their ideas. But basically, they identified some practical shortcomings of current GP systems, some areas of opportunity, and also some suggestions to keep in mind. And I'll try to summarize, again, not doing justice to what the authors wrote. So regarding practical shortcomings, they cite, look, if you go into Kaggle, Stack Overflow, GitHub, GP is simply not there. No, there's one lone bright star, which is the Teapot system by Jason Moore in his group, which is an AutoML system based on tree-based genetic programming. This is a very good tool used widely by others outside the community, but besides that, not much response, no? Especially from practitioners and people in industry. They also say, okay, what is the true standard problem for genetic programming? Convolutional neural networks, computer vision, transformers, NLP, tabular data, ensemble models. What is the problem for genetic programming? Where will it shine and be the first tool out of the toolbox? Symbolic regression, maybe. It could be, but I don't know. This is an open question still. Also, the need for standard libraries. There is simply no equivalent to TensorFlow or PyTorch in our community. This is sorely missing, and this limits, of course, the interaction of first students, then practitioners, and people in industry. Areas of opportunity they identify. The importance of reusing evolved models. We are always doing independent runs for one problem, for one task. We are missing opportunities of reusing the information we are generating. The one author, I think it was Colin Johnson, mentioned the possibility of having a universal fitness function. I cannot say more about this. I just find this very interesting as a possibility, and he goes much deeper into this idea. Incremental evolution, to use it as a way to scale up, going from simple problems to ever more complex ones. And they pose an interesting question. For me and for many, it seems obvious that genetic programming should be the first tool to take out of the toolbox if we are interested in explainable AI. But it is not. No? So there is a gap here. From the types of algorithms we are developing, the types of tools we are presenting, and then this need that the community has for interpretable AI systems, and they are not turning to GP. So this is something that we should be focusing on. Other aspects they suggest that we should keep in mind. They say important to keep the fire burning, maybe the techniques are not so popular now, but you never know what's going to happen in the future. Of course, the example is the history of neural networks. Be more ambitious, similarly to what Bill Langdon stated, try and find those hard problems where current AI state-of-the-art systems are failing. They also, in particular, one commentary posed this question. How useful is the evolutionary method? Now, for many in our field, we feel a barrier when talking with people outside of community. And usually, the barrier is described in this way. Our techniques are random. The user doesn't want random solutions. No? They want something that is determined, that is predictable, and random is not attractive in many situations. But in fact, there are many machine learning algorithms in the state of the art that are random. Just yesterday, I learned about reservoir computing, and it heavily relies on randomness. Other algorithms include extra trees, rocket, random time series forests. These are all random, and they don't suffer from this, how do I say, barrier of communication. So there is something additional. No? I leave this question open. No? I think this is the perfect conference to pose this type of question. I agree that the metaphor is not only important but very useful, but it's important to at least question this and try to come to our own conclusions. So, to finalize the talk, I will try and focus now on the work we are doing. How are we with time? Okay. And especially on these specific points. They were highlighted both by Julian and Yannakakis, and also in the peer commentary that I just discussed. In general for AI, in particular for GP. So we have been focusing on these three domains, which is solving the specialized domains that we identify as particularly hard, decreasing the scale of our systems for interesting new application domains, and also studying the reuse and remastering of the solutions produced by genetic programming. So to start off first, I'm going to give you two examples of the work we have been doing. The first one is a computer vision problem. The second one concerns the estimation of the hypervolume, which I'll give more detail. I just wanted to put this video here because I think it's very nice. It's a collaboration I did with Pierrick and also some colleagues at the CITEDI Research Institute. What you see here is a real-time system where you put in haze into an area, and then in the left you see the original video, and in the right you see the automatic haze removal. This is a filter generated with genetic programming. Yesterday we were discussing the simple GA. This is the simple GP, okay, not complicated at all, but can find this very efficient real-time filter that can automatically eliminate haze on an image. No? And they have implemented this in a real system. The idea is to maybe put this on a car and automatically eliminate haze, for automatic drive and this type of applications. So this you can do even with simple GP or standard GP. Hypervolume. I don't know how many of you are familiar with hypervolume. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with it. So basically, hypervolume is a Pareto compliant performance indicator for multi-objective optimization problems. It is a long way of stating that when you have a Pareto front, conflicting objectives, and you want to measure how good is your approximation to the Pareto front, the first measure you can use is the hypervolume. So it basically computes something like this. So here is a Pareto set. Pareto approximation to the Pareto front. Those are the points in function space. Here you have two objectives. And the hypervolume is basically the area covered by this set of points. Okay? So this is a very useful tool. And one particular use case of this is you can turn a multi-objective problem into a single objective problem. Because instead of optimizing two objectives or n objectives, you optimize one, which is the hypervolume. Okay, which is very good, because now you have, instead of optimizing many, you optimize only one. The bad point is its computational cost. So computing the hypervolume increases exponentially with the number of objectives. So, okay, it's a good idea to have, but not so useful. So what can we do? So in 2022, collaborating with Oliver Schutze and others from Singa staff, we developed a method based on GP to approximate the hypervolume. In fact, we were very happy because we were the first to publish such an approach, and then immediately after we found out one published using deep neural nets, and then another using grammatical evolution by the group of Carlos Cuello. So if we wait just a little bit more, we're not the first ones to publish this. And this work was actually done by my PhD student, Christian Sandoval. There he is, looking very formal. Only time I've seen him so formal in his life, but okay. And this is the picture he sent me. And basically what he do is something very, very simple. We build a data set of Pareto fronts, of course. We normalize those Pareto fronts. We compute a ground truth hypervolume. We extract a set of features from the points in the Pareto front approximation, and we build, of course, a supervised machine learning task. No? And we solve this task with a GP system. And what do we get? Well, we get very good results. Depending on the number of objectives, always we get above R2 measure of 0.85, which is okay. In many cases, very close to 1. So we are efficiently approximating the true hypervolume values. And we integrate this new approximate hypervolume into the multi-objective system. And we get very similar results to using the true one. No? So there you see, in fact, the convergence of the hypervolume of a SMSMOA search. And you see two lines, which is the red one, which is the true SMSMOA with the true hypervolume value, and our GP approximate model, and they overlap very nicely in the standard benchmark test. Okay, so this is very good. In fact, maybe some of you can notice, maybe most of you cannot. One of the Pareto front approximations there is generated using the true hypervolume value. The other one is generated using the GP approximation method. Very nice, similar type of approximations to the Pareto front. Best of all, we get amazing speedups, 100x in 5 objectives. In fact, the computational cost of the evolved models are only linear with respect to the number of objectives, only depend logarithmically on the size of the Pareto set. No? So this was excellent. No? One limitation is that the model that we generate, in fact, all of the papers I showed you before, are limited to a specific number of objectives. So you train the model for 3 objective problems, you can only use a model on 3 objective problems, and so on. No? So this is a limit of that previous work. We've extended this work now, and what we do now is use a different representation of the Pareto front, and basically something very simple. We use the parallel coordinate plot representation, and we treat this as a time series signal, okay, where the horizontal axis is the objective. Then we extract statistical representation of the Pareto set with statistical summary of those plots. We do interpolation to expand the number of points in the signal. We use 2 types. We use standard linear interpolation and also something that's called Andrew plots. I will not go into the details there. And we do the same feature extraction on these new 1D signals, build a learning data set, and yes, we get amazing results. The models get even 500x speed up in 10 objective problems compared to standard hypervolume approximation, and we get very high accuracy as well. So these models are now general in terms of any problem, at least on the benchmark we have tested, and can handle from 3 to 10 objective problems when it makes more sense to use an approximation. Okay, so we are getting these very nice results again with something very close to simple genetic programming. Something pending with this work is to integrate now these models in SMSMOA or another indicator-based multi-objective optimization algorithm. Okay, so those are 2 specialized domains where we have been focusing on using GP. What about decreasing the scale? We have also been working on this. I'll try to go on this a little bit faster. Basically, we've been working with geometric semantic genetic programming. I'll give you a brief summary. Basically, here, the crossover and mutation operators are not at the syntactic level. Well, actually they are, but what you do is just do a linear combination of your trees. So for example, if you want to do a crossover, it's a random linear combination of the two parent trees. And if you want to do mutation, it's a random linear combination of your parent with a random function, okay? So that's basically it. Again, Alberto was here for 2 days, the original proposal of this method. No? What have we done with this method? It's been very interesting to us. The work mostly done by another student of mine. He is Jose Manuel Munoz. He's about to finish his PhD. And the first thing he did is he implemented this algorithm in a CUDA framework. These are very simple linear operations with vectors, so you can do it very fast. And we get some very nice results. These are results on the SR benchmark. We do some fine tweaking of the original algorithm by Moraglio and his colleagues. And we get performance that is quite good. Okay, not state of the art. Up there you see operon and semantic backpropagation, which is some of the state-of-the-art symbolic regression methods. Then you see others like XGBoost and light boosting. And then you see where GSGP falls, which is interesting. That group of methods where it is, there is, for example, one method, very famous method called Eureka, which is based on the H-Pareto fitness approach, and it's the AFP method right there. And GSGP basically gets the same performance. The interesting point is that we get very nice speedups. So there, for example, we are with XGBoost and FFX, which is one method I was discussing yesterday. And the method now by genetic programming can compete very nicely in terms of runtimes. The state-of-the-art symbolic regression methods are way down there in runtime cost. So usually bottleneck for GP systems is their runtime. Of course, they're very slow. So we have focused on making systems that are more efficient. Following in this line, we have also implemented now this technique on FPGA board. This is a low-level implementation, predominantly done by my colleague, Yasmin Maldonado, and her students. I know very little of this, so I'll just go into the results. Basically, they did a fully pipeline implementation of the algorithm using VHDL, and they get a highly efficient method. Many details regarding the circuits and the arithmetic union. They designed one especially for the GP system. And you will see these published in the Genetic Programming of Evolvable Machines journal just this year. And I will just summarize, we get amazing speedups compared even to the GPU. Because of course, all the operations are happening in parallel, in hardware. Our final goal is to have our first GP chip, to maybe put on an IoT device, and then we will have a GP system learning in a distributed fashion. Okay, so this is a cool result I wanted to highlight. Again, done mostly by Yasmin and her students. Finally, some more exploratory results just finalized a few weeks ago. How are we with time?
15 minutes for the questions. So.
Perfect. I'll finish them. We've been concerned with transfer learning, okay? And the analysis of problem space from a GP perspective. So first, how have we done transfer learning? We've been using a series of methods that I can summarize as MXGP methods. It started by the work by Sara Silva, and many of you would know her. She's in Portugal and in the University of Lisbon, and she proposed in 2014 a method called M2GP. And from that, several variants of these methods have been developed. M3GP, M4GP, and 5GP this year, and as well M6GP. So me and my students have worked on two of those variants, which is the M3GP and M5GP methods. I will briefly just summarize here. These are basically wrapper-based approaches where GP is used to transform the feature space of a problem, okay? So you start with only for tabular data so far. You have a feature space representation. You want to transform this into a better representation on which to perform your learning. It's basically a wrapper approach. Here is for, if you use trees, it would look something like this. You will have a dummy node at the root, and then many leaves from that root node, and each leaf subtree there I mean, would be a new feature dimension for your problem space representation. There are many methods that follow this basic idea, GP-based methods. A few years ago, we published a taxonomy of these methods. And basically what we have is a standard evolutionary process for our systems using multiple expressions and then all of the variants starting with the work by Sa. One of the first extensions we did was again to move these implementations onto the GPU. I will go publish just this year, and I will just highlight that again on the SR benchmark we reached close to state-of-the-art performance, of course better than DSGP, and still staying with very good and low computational cost. Okay, so again, exploiting GPUs I think is important. For example, all of the methods, GP methods used in SR bench, which is the standard benchmark for symbolic regression, none of them are implemented on GPUs. I think this is something that has to be now much more common in our systems to be able to compete in terms of efficiency. And something interesting that we found out is that the models that we generate with these techniques, this is work done by a previous student of mine, Luis Munoz, is that he could do transfer learning of the models. So I'll just go to the plot, and here you have a, this is a target problem, okay? These are just some symbolic regression problems. It doesn't matter what they are from different domains. And we have a target problem here. And then we have a line, which is the performance of M3GP applied on this problem, okay? And then we have a line, which is a baseline method, which is multiple linear regression, and it's on top, no? So M3GP is much better than multiple linear regression. Okay, and here you see box plots. What are these box plots? We took from this problem, for example, this is a concrete prediction problem. We transfer the models learned on this problem to this other problem. And we see the performance. So the transferred models sometimes reach the same level of performance as using the GP system directly on the target. But this means that GP is always finding solutions that are in fact quite general, not specifically for our problem. No, usually we assume that our problem is a special problem, it's a unique problem, and we need to use a technique especially designed for this one. But in fact, for all these problems, you can see that at least you are better than the baseline. You know, you always get performance that is below the baseline. And in some cases, if you do tune it correctly, you can get exactly the same performance as you would get by solving the problem directly. So this was a very interesting result for us. We did this for regression and for classification. And this is when we started to think that we should be reusing and remastering all of our GP runs. So why did transfer learning work? And how is it working? And this is the work done by Joel Lignation, which is my current PhD student working on this topic. And basically he's been trying to understand this. So he's looking at problem sets, looking at specific problems, then looking at the learning and optimization process that occurs on these problems, and finally looking at the final model. In fact, there are many techniques that focus on this type of aspects. So for example, the instant space analysis by Katie Smith-Miles, I think it is state-of-the-art method for analyzing a problem set. Yesterday, loans were described, which are related to search trajectory networks, and I think this is the state-of-the-art approach to understand an optimization process, at least in evolutionary computation. This is a very interesting method to analyze individual problems. It's called Deep Insight, published in Nature Communications. And the Grand Tour is a deep learning approach to understand the model and the learning process behind it. So we're trying to integrate this type of analysis into GP-based systems and evolution. So basically the methodology, the first one I'm going to tell you is very simple. We have a problem set, and then we compute a distance between problems. And here we use two types of distances. One distance, the Euclidean distance, considers a set of meta features of the problem. Okay, for example, instant space analysis is based on this approach. You take one learning problem and you extract many meta features of the problem. In fact, they go into very large number, I think more than 100. We are only extracting about 7 or 8 meta features for each problem. And this is a description of the problem, okay? The other approach we're using, I'll tell you a bit more about this, is called the optimal transfer dataset distance. And this is a metric in problem space. I will describe it in a little bit. And from this, we compute a distance matrix, we build a graph, and then we try to do graph analysis on the problem set, okay? And then we try to see if the graph that we obtain can be correlated in some way with a description of the problem difficulty of each of the task. No? And for this, we use a simple machine learning approach. So first, the optimal transfer dataset distance. This is a very old method developed basically by a French mathematician in the 18th century based on optimal transfer. Basically, optimal transfer is the amount of effort you need to do to transform one pile of dirt into another one, okay? In fact, this is the original goal of this, to move efficiently dirt from one place to another. But of course, your piles can be probability distributions. So how much effort do I need to put to move this into this? Okay, this is the problem of optimal transport. Sounds very complicated, but in fact, it's a linear programming problem. And recently, in 2020, 2 researchers from Microsoft, Alvarez Mellis and Fusi, published an extension of this measure to data sets. Okay, so you can see a data set describing a distribution of your data in feature space, and they propose a metric in data set space to measure 2 data sets. We found this very useful for our analysis. So basically, we are producing graphs like this. So here what you see is 40 machine learning problems which we solve with genetic programming. And you see links which are weighted based on the optimal transfer dataset distance. We eliminate, of course, this is a fully connected graph. So to get some information, we filter out the largest distances, which are the least interesting, and get something like this. Then we do some community detection on the graphs and with some standard algorithms. And for example, here you have 2 clear groups of problems in the graph. And then you can filter out more edges, and you still get an interesting representation of your problem set. And you can filter out more and still get this type of information. So these graphs, we feel for now, are much more informative than these graphs. These graphs are produced by the meta feature approach. And here they're not very interesting. Your problems, which are the nodes, are all clustered together in one big group and with minority groups dispersed around. So the OTDD measure, the optimal transfer dataset distance measure, is giving us information that is relevant to the structure of the distribution of problem types. And basically what we found is that we can detect the same structure in these graphs using performance indicators or difficulty indicators of the problem. So for example, the empirical classification error, the imbalance in the data set, the number of instances related to the number of features, we can detect the same groups with around 70% accuracy using a very simple classifier, decision tree classifier. We can get better with a better classifier, but we are interested in an interpreter model. So this means that in fact the graph generated by OTDD is related to the difficulty of the problems, which will be useful, of course, to decide when to or when to not use genetic programming on a specific problem instance. Finally, the last work done by Joel, which I'll go right quickly in 2 minutes, he's been focusing on analyzing the problems at a more fine level. Basically, M3GP is doing the following. You have your original problem data set. Here you have a TSNE representation of your data set. You send it to M3GP, and you get a new representation of your data. What is always assumed is that this new representation will be a better one to learn a decision boundary than your original one. No? This is the reason we're doing feature space transformation. Okay, but how big is that modification? How big does it have to be? How complex? how impactful, how big of a change? Okay, so we have 3 questions. How can we measure the change? We already have the answer, OTDD measure. Will work just fine for that. And how does the magnitude of the change correlate with other things we are interested in? For example, performance. Is a big change related to a big improvement in performance? Or do we just need smaller modifications? And also, how is it related to other aspects in the modeling process? So I'll show you some results. We took a bunch of machine learning data sets, 7 classification, 6 regression problems. We do 30 runs on each problem. So that's 13 problems, 30 runs, that's 390 models, okay? We produce a model with M3GP, we have the transformed data sets, we compute the distance, and compute a series of performance indicators. And what do we get? So here is a plot, no? Each one represents the model produced by a single run, okay? The size relates to the number of nodes in the model, the complexity of the model. This is often called, it's just the size of the model. Here we have the OTDD measure, and here we have the number of features produced in the new representation. Okay, so here, in fact, it is mixed, the classification and regression tasks, no? So one might imagine, where are the regression problems and where are the classification problems? Will they be different or will they be similarly dispersed? Or are single problem runs grouped together or dispersed? So for example, is this group of models from a single problem or from several different ones? No? So you can analyze without knowing anything of where the problem is and just analyze how this distribution occurs. Of course, we add information and we reveal some patterns, and these are the regression tasks and these are the classification tasks. So immediately we see a different dispersion, different type of results produced by the same method depending on the problem class. And so what Koza is doing is going from the global level, no, analyzing all the problems, supervised learning problems as a whole, going into the group level and into individual problems, and then at the run level. And we're trying to discover regularities that can be useful at the different levels of analysis. So to finalize, I will go into the results. Basically, I will go very quickly. What we are finding is that some correlations between the magnitude of the change and other indicators do not appear at the global level. So it depends if it's regression or classification. But then they appear very strongly when you analyze at the type level or the group level. So strong correlations for all classification problems and strong correlations for all the regression problems. But then when you go at the problem level and just analyze runs from a single problem, most of the correlations disappear. Of course, this could be related to the fact that you just have less data, but we have been performing and extending our experiments, and this doesn't seem to be the case. It is the case that knowing what type of problem you have is much more relevant than necessarily being at a particular group. So these are kind of the final results I will discuss. And what we intend to do is, of course, to use this measure to directly optimize it and to learn models with a specific magnitude of transformation that might be useful in a scenario, and also to facilitate transfer learning, which in fact has been done with this approach, but using other techniques. So in conclusion, to end, sorry I went over a little bit, I invite you all to continue to be inspired and disappointed and also perplexed by artificial intelligence. I think these are all good feelings to have, and also regarding evolutionary computation. I would also continue to encourage you to find new and creative ways of applying evolutionary computation, genetic programming, and AI in general. And of course, let's continue to collaborate. The tacos are waiting for you in Tijuana. Don't forget to submit your next work on genetic programming to the Genetic Programming and Evolvable Machines. I'm incoming editor-in-chief, so I need a lot of submissions. So please do not forget. And thank you again for your time, and sorry for going over.
Thank you very much, Leonardo. Please,
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation and animated presentation. One question, maybe you don't know technical or not, but I would like to come back to the hypervolume estimation
Yes.
with GP.
Yes.
The question is it working? It seems that the results are very impressive. The results are very impressive because you are scaling up the results, the estimation 100 times or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
The question is it working well for all kind of Pareto form, for instance, linear, concave, concave,
Yeah.
and mixed, for instance. So whatever the nature of the
It appears it generalizes quite well. So we've used the two benchmarks, the WFG benchmark and the DTSZ.
TXZ.
Yeah. And I don't remember, here it is. This one is the one where there is some difficulty sometimes. I don't remember which one it is.
I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, maybe. Back,
Most often is the shaker.
yeah, and
So
this part of the work was the focus of Oliver Schutz and his group, and I did the GP. We did the GP,
no problem.
but so I have some gaps. But yeah, and in fact, with less objectives, 3 and 4 objectives, the difference is more significant than when you go to higher objectives. So, of course, this is related to the fact that running SMS MOA with many individuals in a large number of objectives will be very slow. So it's difficult to scale up properly. But we try to use standard population sizes. And but the difference seems to diminish as the number of objectives increases, which is good because it's the main usefulness of the model. For 2, 3 objective problems,
No, because the algorithms are very
yes,
very well
yes,
defined, well
Yes.
for 2 or 3 objectives.
exactly.
But for
5, 6, 7, 8, and now we go up to 10, and you get much more speed up, in fact. Much more speed up and much more closer estimation.
But whatever the nature of the Pareto form.
It seems. It seems. Only benchmarks till now. No real world problems yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is that Clément?
Oui.
Oh, sorry.
Can I? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Leo, thank you so much. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Just I want to, because here about the DTLZ2,
Yes.
I just want to mention in the DTLZ data set, that benchmark set that we have, DTLZ2, 4 and 7, they have less correlation between the objective functions. That's why it may be more difficult in order to estimate the hypervolume.
Yeah.
That's why here you have most probably. And also there is a kind of a remark about the hypervolume, which is of course one of the criteria that we use in order to evaluate the performance of the multi-objective optimization algorithms. But however, it is not something like a kind of the sufficient criteria to evaluate, because the hypervolume is also subject to many criticisms generally. For example, it is very sensitive to it overestimates the points around the extreme points of the Pareto form.
Yeah.
It is one of the things. It's not only the complexity, and also the other point that we have in the hypervolume is to how to determine the reference point. It is also another question. So it means that for the DTLZ problem, okay, we know the problem, we know that what is the shape of. It is not that difficult to determine a reference point, but for the real life problems, it would be more difficult. And also, I have a request. You had a slide talking about the M3GP that you say that you transfer the data. Could you please a little bit explain, because it was very interesting that, and I wanted to know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so you could do this, and people have done it in many different ways. So basically what you need is a GP system that gives you multiple outputs, okay? So the original ones by Sarah, M2GP, M3GP, and M6GP is a method she published this year, which is a multi-objective version. She uses a tree-based representation, and we use with her tree-based representation. I like the representation proposed by Lacaba, also with, working with Sarah. They use a stack-based representation. And with this stack-based, it's simple, because always the stack, I don't know if you're familiar with push genetic programming, but you have an output stack in your system, and always the stack never is empty. So you return the top of the last value in the stack, usually is the output of the system, but usually you have a stack with unused data. So what Bill did was very simple. He just said, oh, I use all this stuff. And then you don't have any extra thing to do. He just used his normal push GP, which already produced a stack that they were discarding, and then they were used. And this one was good for us because to implement the stack is simpler in the GPU. You can do the trees, but then you have to control how you do the crossover, and not necessary. We can do a linear representation, and we can put this on the GPU very easily. And so in fact what we do is took the GSGP system we already had, which was stack-based, but we were discarding the stack, and then just take the full stack. And then this is easy to do in the GPU. And then we get some very good performance, you know, very strong performance on this benchmark, and very good performance in terms of time, runtime. You know? Which, if you run, for example, M3GP, my student first did it in MATLAB, and Sarah's PhD student who just recently graduated did it in Python. It's slow. I mean, 30 minutes for a run. Sometimes 1 hour. I mean, people who are doing machine learning don't want to run 1 hour experiment for one data set. And this thing runs similarly to a random forest, no, to something like this. So now at least, okay, you don't have to do anything with different. It has a scikit-learn wrapper, so you just download it and you fit and predict, and okay, you don't have to wait unusually long. And but now we want to understand what's actually going on. One of the things I didn't mention was that, in fact, it seems that the best performance improvements we are getting from this type of systems are from the smallest modifications as measured by the OTDD distance. So in fact, you don't have to change a lot to get a big improvement. In fact, in many cases, when you change too much, you get only small improvement in performance. So this means that our GP systems could be, in fact, simpler and still get the same level of performance. Now, for many years, I tell my students, no, make it more complicated, more sophisticated, add more things. And then the measure seems to suggest that no, simple is the more efficient way, and you get a better in-person performance. At least initial analysis is suggesting.
Thank you for the great talk. My question is much more general because I'm not at all into genetic programming. Also, we soon start actually a PhD with Xavier on a similar topic. And actually, what we will try to do basically is there is a trend actually now both in AI and in the evolutionary competition community to do some sort of GP with language models. And I was surprised that actually since you started your talk on language models, AI, language model, genetic programming, I was surprised that you didn't mention this. So I guess you're aware of this kind of work. There are some special tracks, I think, at Gecko. Actually, you can use a language model to produce code. And so you can view basically the prompt a bit as a sort of genome that then produce code. And what is very interesting also is that then you can also use a language model as a mutation operator.
Yes.
Like given a program and an instruction, you can then take this program. So there are more and more work on this topic, and I was wondering if, first, if you consider that actually this is GP, or if this is something different, and second, if you think it's promising, or it's a dead end, or
No, I think it's very promising. I think I know a very good groups doing this. For example, I know the group of Unamei at MIT are doing some very fine work on this, combining them. And I think this is a very promising approach. And this is my general comment. I think as a community, we should have this type of work. And my own personal focus is, I am not against the language models, is that I am aware that I will never be able to be in a lab, in a country even, that can produce this type of language model. So I'm interested in finding ways, techniques, that are relevant to constrained situations. Okay, so my personal interest is to go to areas where we do not have to rely on things that we will not be able to control. This is my personal interest. But if you ask me at the community level, as a scientific question, I'm very interested in seeing this type of results and this type of analysis, because maybe then we can also find ways of simplifying those models at some point and then using what we need only for the GP. But because certainly in this case, not all the functionality of the language model will be relevant to the GP system, only some aspects. And maybe using the language model, people can identify the important abilities and then transfer this or regenerate these abilities in a simpler, more efficient way. So maybe this could be a long-term goal. But right now, my own goal with my students is to take the other approach.
Okay, thank you.
Just one last question.
I don't know.
Two last questions. Yeah, please.
Thank you. I was wondering about, so I'm not used to genetic programming. I wonder what are the possible sizes of the dataset, because for instance with ChatGPT, the datasets are immense, so they use stochastic gradient descent to train models. And is it possible to use genetic programming?
Yes, you can use stochastic gradient descent. So for example, this is, I think, a very good and important benchmark, the SR bench. It is based on a data set of machine learning problems published by Penn State University, PMLB machine learning problem set. These are all small to medium sized problems, no tabular data, no massive data sets in the type of work. I know there are some people who are doing I'm using the word big data applications of genetic programming, but they are the exception, not the norm. So yes, in fact, we are far behind in this regard. From my point of view, is it worth the effort to catch them, or to focus on tasks that where you don't have this type of data, where you will not get the possible improvement. This is why I think Alberto Tonda is correct, that the ARC prize is a very good inspiration for GP, people working in evolution evaluation and GP, because these are very small problems, difficult ones, that the largest models just cannot handle. Maybe GP cannot either, but at least it's a good place to test.
Just a
Evin for the last one.
small, very rapid remark. So thank you very much for this talk. And I particularly like your, let's say, frugal perspective on the way to address complex problems. I think you are right with the ARC combination, but maybe we could add a dimension to ARC combination. That means, are we able to use the smallest possible or the more frugal problems instead of running big stuff like LLMs? So, well, thank you very much.